And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and pedantic and insipid bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. It's a great day to be in the Cowboy State, my friends. Welcome to the program. On today's show, a bunch of random stuff. I don't know if you know this or not, but there was another guy arrested for saying that he was going to assassinate the president. I bet you haven't heard anything about that. And there's a lot of other things. Rod Miller has a new column out. And all I have to say, Rod, is I love you, man, but you could use a little bit of honesty. Rod Miller came up with the column. And I mean, he works for Wild Pile now. He doesn't work for the Cowboy, but he publishes a column that is pretty darn dishonest. And I love you, Rod, but you got to be honest about what you're writing. And you weren't. And so we're going to talk about that on the program. But we begin this morning with the post-millennial. And I am shocked that this is not front page news everywhere. And you know, the liberal mainstream media, we can probably figure out why they don't cover stuff like this, because they do want some wacko to assassinate the president. But it doesn't make any sense that any of the other news outlets aren't covering. And perhaps this is just one of those, you know, I mean, I'm sure the Secret Service is investigating all sorts of different people across the country. And probably every president has multiple threats going at any given time. But you would think, given who President Trump is, and that he was almost assassinated within, you know, a centimeter or a millimeter, God saved him. That's obvious. Had he turned his head just a little bit more, he wouldn't be around with us. So I would think this would be a special case for the media and that they might cover something, but apparently not. From the post-millennial, Georgia man arrested for threatening to assassinate President Trump. A Georgia man was arrested on federal charges Friday for making threats against President Donald Trump during a live TikTok broadcast. Juan Rashawn Porter faces charges of, quote, knowingly and willfully making a threat against the President of the United States, according to a press release from the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District of Georgia. Porter's comments during the live stream included, quote, "So there's only one way to make America great, and that is, you know, doing away with President Trump." He actually said, "I'm going to kill President Trump." And he goes on and on and on. I don't even want to read the rest of this because this crazy algorithm will probably get after. But I mean, he was threatening to kill the president of the United States. U.S. Attorney Theodore Hertzberg described the allegations as, quote, serious and required a swift, decisive, and collaborative response. He added, "We do not tolerate threats against public officials or law enforcement officers, and Porter will now face the consequences of his actions." Now, it's alleged on July 26th of 2025, so not that long ago, Porter allegedly joined a TikTok live stream about President captioned Alligator Alcatraz, commenting, and then he reads it again. Porter was taken away into custody and is currently detained pending further proceedings. During a search of Porter's apartment, authorities found a pistol, ammunition, 2 pipes, tannerite, and a contact explosive. Porter has prior convictions of terroristic threats, including a witness, mutiny in a penal institution, drug possession, battery, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and domestic violence, the DOJ said, noting that Porter is currently on probation. Well, the question is, why isn't the mainstream media covering it? You would think that slightly conservative news outlets like Fox News would be all over this, and perhaps they were on the 26th, and I just missed it. But I would think this would garner at least a little more attention than it's getting. But it took the post-millennial to bring this up. So I'll try to find out if there were some news reports about this. I would hope so. But pretty scary. And again, we live, and this brings up another point, right? So he joins this live stream on July 26th, and it's not even been a month since it happened. And so you got to know that the Secret Service was on it pretty well right after it happened. And it speaks to the, I don't know if you want to, the velocity of news. That's a phrase. I came up with it when I was talking with one of my newspaper owner type friends. And, I just told him, I'm like, man, the velocity of the news is so high. It is so fast that, that's why print journalism is going out of business. And he agreed with it. But think about that, right? So this guy gets on a live stream on probably some obscure TikTok channel, and maybe they were watching him because obviously he's a criminal. But he gets on this obscure TikTok channel, and then boom, the Secret Service is at his door. In a way, this is kind of a good thing, but on the other hand, kind of spooky, man, that your communications are being watched that closely. And in this case, thankfully so. We can't have people threatening the president, but anyway, should be top line, above the fold, front page news. But that's the first that I saw about it this morning. Now I have been covering the DC crime thing pretty well, and now the New York Times. At first the New York Times and all the Democrats were saying that there is no crime in Washington D.C. I tried to find this ridiculous soundbite. There was this MSNBC panelist, correspondent, whatever. I don't even know who he is, but I heard him say on a broadcast, well, I wear high heels around, and I don't have a problem in D.C., so there has to be no crime. It's ridiculous comments like that. But 6 days after calling the D.C. crime crisis non-existent, the New York Times' Peter Baker complains that Trump isn't fixing crime. So first, there is no crime. Now, we're complaining that he's not taking care of it. And I quote from the Federalist: 6 days after declaring the crime crisis in Washington, D.C. was non-existent, the New York Times chief White House correspondent Peter Baker is complaining that President Donald Trump isn't fixing crime in Washington, D.C. On August 11th, Trump announced his administration would be taking back control of the nation's capital after decades of government failure. Trump invoked Section 740 of the District of Columbia's Self-Government and Governmental Reorganization Act, which gives his administration authority to take control of the city's police department. And if you remember, during our interview with Representative Hageman, I asked her about this, and she said, really, it's not the administration taking over. A better way to describe it is they're working in concert with the D.C. police. So however you want to characterize it, the National Guard is assisting the D.C. police, or they're there and they're arresting people, which is a good thing. Let's see here. Trump also declared a public safety emergency in the nation's capital and instructed Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to deploy the D.C. National Guard to help aid in crime fighting. Propagandists like Baker sprang into action to decry the move as unnecessary. Citing a non-existent crime crisis, Trump plans to take over the Washington, D.C. police and put troops in the street of the nation's capital. Contrary to his claims, violent crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low. Baker posted on X August 11th. Now, it's Washington, D.C., and so the question is, why would anyone assume that the crime rate is low? In every other Democrat-controlled city, crime is actually up. Well, the way you make statistics, I mean, and it's the old adage, my friends. Statistics lie, and liars use statistics. You know, if you're not an honest reporter, you can twist any statistic to say anything that you want. I mean, and that's how they get the whole dumb statistic about firearms owners, that if you own a firearm, you're more likely to commit a crime, which is exactly the opposite of the truth. The folks who have that are concealed carry owners that have a concealed weapons permit are the constituency with the lowest crime rate in America. But I mean, it's a perfect example of how statistics are used to bend the truth. And in this case, what they're doing is police will show up to a felony level crime, and instead of, making the charge a felony crime, they'll just downgrade it to where it's not a felony and it doesn't hit the violent crime statistics. And honestly, that is the way that they made the crime statistics in Washington, D.C. lower. Well, propagandists like Baker have been working really hard to say that there isn't any crime in D.C. Citing a non-existent crime crisis, Trump plans to take over Washington, D.C. Now, of course, Baker's narrative collapses under the weight of the facts. Data shows that the nation's capital is plagued with violent crime, with more than 1,600 violent crimes reported in 2025 thus far, and roughly 16,000 total crimes. According to the White House, carjackings are more than 3 times the national average. The White House Policy Communications Director Jackie Kotkowitz, noting that 547% increase in carjackings between 2018 and 2023. I mean, there's no questioning that there is a crime crisis there. But to make matters worse, allegations of officials cooking the books, this is what I was referring to earlier, on crime statistics have been plaguing the city. D.C. Police Union Chairman Greg Pemberton told NBC Washington last month that when its members respond to the scene of a felony offense where there's a victim reporting that a felony occurred, inevitably there will be a lieutenant or a captain that will show up on that scene and direct those members to take a report for a lesser offense. So instead of taking a report for a shooting or a stabbing or a carjacking, they'll order that officer to take a report for a theft, or an injured person to the hospital, or a felony assault that is not the same type of classification. So they're cooking the books for, a political purpose. And, that is to make Trump look bad. I mean, that's what all of this is. Later on in the program, let's see here. Yeah, later on in the program, I've got a specific example of that. And I spoke to Cynthia Lummis's not chief of staff, but campaign manager yesterday, and he basically said the same thing. That the Democrats, they're doing everything they can to oppose Donald Trump, even if that means cooking the books and not prosecuting criminals because it makes them look bad. Notably, Metro Police Department Commander Michael Pulliam was suspended in May for, quote, allegedly changing crime statistics in his district, as Fox News reported. Pulliam is currently under investigation for allegedly altering those. The facts themselves are so glaring that Baker later admitted that crime is in fact real, before trying to blame Trump, who is trying to curb the epidemic. Quote, and this is what he put on X. The Washington Post tracked where Trump's forces are patrolling in Washington. Spoiler alert, they're not where the crime is. Now, wait a minute. Not a couple of weeks ago, you said that crime didn't exist. And now you're saying that it's there, except that the National Guard and the police force, they're not exactly where the criminals are. I mean, the rank hypocrisy of these people in the media is just amazing, my friends. They don't care about the truth. And more importantly, they don't care about you knowing the truth. Their only mission is to destroy the orange man. And that's all that it is. It doesn't matter that he is right, that he is solving conflicts around the world. None of that matters. They don't care. Trump could end the Ukraine war tomorrow, and the media would be calling for another war to happen somewhere else. I mean, it is absolutely incredible, my friends. Now, Baker went on from claiming D.C. crime was non-existent to then scolding Trump for not doing enough to fix it. By denying the reality of the problem when Trump points it out, and then attempting to weaponize the problem against him when it becomes undeniable, Baker reveals that he and almost all the press are merely propagandists for whatever the Democrat narrative is. I mean, and again, let me just give you another example of this. Russia. the Obamagate, as we've been calling. Now, Breitbart News has a piece this morning where Caroline Leavitt just let in to the White House press corps, and all of it was over the Russia-Ukraine negotiation coverage. Now, the press secretary, and here's what Breitbart says about it. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt tore into the media's handling of Trump's recent negotiations with Russia, Ukraine, and the European leaders during a White House briefing on Tuesday. Rapid Response 47, the official White House Rapid Response account, posted a video clip Tuesday featuring Caroline Leavitt alongside Press Secretary, the Rapid Response team, and the fake news for their lies and negotiations with Trump and Ukraine. So let me go ahead and just play that video for you so you know exactly what we're talking about. Just a second here. I really miss Agent 29. When he's here, all I have to do is say, hey, hit this one, and he's got it. But here I got to do all the button pushing. So here you go. Here's Caroline.
However,
Leavitt.
One thing that has absolutely not changed is the media's negative and downright false coverage of President Trump and his foreign policy accomplishments. From the beginning of this entire process, much of the left-wing media has been actively rooting against the President of the United States in the pursuit of peace. Initially, the media ridiculously claimed that President Trump was somehow beholden to Russia for even agreeing to have a face-to-face discussion with President Putin inside of the United States. The media said President Trump was making a grave mistake by, quote, legitimizing Putin. They were aghast that President Trump would treat another world leader like a world leader. The media relentlessly attacked President Trump and claimed he suffered a, quote, major defeat for not immediately emerging with a final agreement, even though he said heading into that meeting, this was a meeting to listen and to understand how to move the ball forward. All weekend following those historic U.S.-Russia bilateral talks, we listened to clueless pundits on television trying but failing to claim that the president had failed. The so-called experts in the foreign policy establishment, whose record is nothing but endless wars, trillions of wasted taxpayer dollars, and dead America.
All right, hold on just a second. I mean, the important point here is to point out, you've got to point out their lies. And because there's a lot of people, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of mainstream media outlets are failing, like PMSNBC. I talked about this yesterday on the program, and I'm going to go into it in more detail later on. But the jig is up for the mainstream media. American citizens have been lied to so often, and it's been proven that the media is wrong so many times that the vast majority of those people who watch the news and who go and vote and pay attention to politics, they're not buying it anymore. Simply because, they have been lied to so often. And that's what Caroline Leavitt is responding to. Let's go ahead and finish this one up.
Have the nerve to try and lecture President Trump, who has solved 7 global conflicts in 7 months, about peace. This is the same president, by the way, who brokered the Abraham Accords in his first term, on top of more than half a dozen other peace deals this year alone, as I just said. We also saw yesterday the president of Ukraine and all of the other major leaders of Europe fly across the Atlantic Ocean to meet President Trump at the White House because of the progress that was made, and that, if you ask the media, failed meeting, but it was not. It was highly productive and it was successful. This is why Americans' trust in the mass media is at a lowest point in more than 5 decades. Diplomacy is a delicate process, and instead of reporting the facts about what is happening here at this White House and what is happening between this president and other leaders around the world, many outlets in this room continue to try to actively undermine the president and sabotage the efforts towards peace.
And that's exactly what they're doing, my friends. Leavitt highlighted Trump's record of resolving 7 global conflicts in the past 7 months. Now think about that. How many global conflicts did Biden solve? The people who are actually running the White House. How many conflicts did they solve? How many did they start? How many did they allow? And yet President Trump comes into office, and he's not even past his first full year, and there's already 7 of them that have stopped. In pretty short order, there's going to be 8. Now, the Russia-Ukraine thing is going to take a little bit longer, but just think about that. 7 months, 7 global conflicts, and it's President Trump. And the media refuses to give him credit for any of it. Let's see here. And one of the big ones, and I mentioned this yesterday on the show, is the Abraham Accords. He got nations in the Middle East to come together and talk with Israel, something that had never really happened before. Now, I mean, there were some other people, Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter, tried to find some sort of peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, but that always falls apart. But the Abraham Accords, they're still sticking there. And now that President Trump is back in the Oval Office, I've seen reports that Saudi Arabia wants to join the Abraham Accords. So that one's not done. And add on top of it, there were 7 others. Levitt added that the presence of the Ukrainian President Zelensky and other European leaders at the White House this week emphasized the progress made from the Alaska summit, describing the meetings as, quote, highly productive and successful, despite media claims to the contrary. She concluded by saying that Americans' trust in the media is at its lowest point in 5 decades, adding that, quote, many outlets in this room continue to try to actively undermine the president and sabotage the efforts towards peace. Vice President Vance responded on X saying that Caroline Levitt lighting the American media up for lying about our negotiations with Trump and Russia. But there's no end to the media lies, my friends. And living in Wyoming, we tend to think that, that sort of stuff doesn't happen here. But I'm telling you, my friends, the Wyoming media, they are no different. All you have to do is pick up a copy of the Pravda on the Platte, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. That it is just another left-wing media source. And I mean, ask yourself, how many times have you seen an article written in any of the Wyoming media outlets that was at all favorable of the Freedom Caucus or conservatives in general? I'll give you more time if you want. I mean, if you need way more time, I don't. But the truth is, you won't find one. And if you do, I'd like to see it, because it's been so long since I've seen really anything that was favorable to conservatives in the Wyoming media. And we're going to talk about a big one here after the break. Our pal Rod Miller, probably, and this is not a high bar, but probably one of the more dishonest columns that I've seen in quite some time. And by the way, the first Rod Miller column that I ever talked about on the program, you know what? I should go pull that soundbite for you. I won't be able to do it on this program, but maybe for tomorrow's episode of the program, I'll have a piece of that soundbite so you can hear exactly what Rod Miller wrote. I mean, he compared Trump supporters to racists and skinheads, and I mean, it's actually a pretty terrible piece. But that's what the media does, my friends, and to think that Wyoming is any different than anywhere else on the planet, it's that's complete folly, my friends. I mean, none of that is actually true. Well, it's a little bit early, but let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the media. I've got a piece from the Washington Free Beacon, why the DNC is failing. So we'll do that when we come back. Just a second. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Wednesday. Having more fun than anybody should be legally allowed to have. Doing what I was born to do, my friends. Talking to you whenever I want. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to the show. After today's program, don't forget about the Cowboy State Politics podcast, which on Wednesdays, it usually gets published sometime between 12 and 1. Turns out that the guy that is, quote, standing on his conservative values, former Redcoat Speaker of the House, Eric Barlow, is so confident in his run for governor that he's already started encouraging people to engage in crossover voting. That piece comes directly from his Facebook page. So we're going to talk about that, and I'll probably expound a little bit more on this piece of crap column from Rod Miller. But don't miss the podcast sometime between 12 and 1 today. And it's published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. So don't miss any of those. So from the Washington Free Beacon. Oh, well, and let me just give you a little lead into this. Anybody with half a brain could look at the Democrat Party and figure out why it is that they're failing. I mean, it's not hard, my friends. They lied to us about COVID. They told us that it was going to kill us all. And granted, there were a lot of people that died from COVID, you know, folks that were of old age or of ill health. Yeah. I mean, and a lot of those, a stiff wind would have taken them out. We were told that if we didn't take the shot, we were all going to die, that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And yeah, that was Representative Bob Nicholas on the floor of the Wyoming House. Yes, your elected leaders in Wyoming were absolutely on board. A lot of them were on board with this. If you want some really incriminating stuff, you should go back on YouTube and watch the 2021 special session that was held. There were some amazing things that were said on the floor of the House of Representatives, my friend. And I mean, a lot of it is ready-made campaign ads. All you got to do is just take the soundbite, play it, and you're good to go. But anyway, we were told that if you didn't take the shot, you were all going to die. Turns out, if you took the shot, you are way more likely to die. There have been a ton of people who have died from cardiac events simply because they took that stupid shot. Notice that I'm not referring to it as a vaccine, because it's not. And, you know, we've been told over and over, we were told over and over that Kamala Harris was going to run circles around Donald Trump, that there was no way that Donald Trump was going to be the 47th president of the United States, that she was just going to beat him like a drum. That didn't happen. In fact, she got blown out of that election. But all along, the media has been lying to us, and the Democrat Party as well. Now, you add on top of that for Trump's first administration, during the Biden administration, they carried it on, trying to destroy Donald Trump. And now what we're seeing is it doesn't really matter what it is, the Democrats oppose it. Yesterday, I had a meeting with Cynthia Lummis's campaign manager, and he told me that one of the problems in getting the senators scheduled on the program is they never know when they're going to vote because the Democrats are holding up every single nomination that they can possibly hold up. And he gave the example of a guy who's been like an ambassador to 5 different countries, and they're holding him up just because it was Donald Trump that nominated him. That it doesn't matter what it is. If Donald Trump's name is attached to it, the Democrats will hold out on it for as long as humanly possible. And to think that American citizens don't see that, to even assume that we're in the same media environment that we were even 3 years ago, even 5 years ago, certainly, definitely not where we were 10 years ago, is the reason why the Democrats appear to not be doing anything at all. And their fundraising shows it. And this is a piece from the Washington Free Beacon. Quote, the Democratic National Committee is trailing far behind its Republican counterpart by nearly all fundraising metrics, as donors view the Democrat Party as, quote, rudderless, off-message, and leaderless, months into President Donald Trump's second term, according to a Monday report. After a brutal 2024 election and several months into rebuilding efforts under new party leadership, I don't even know who that guy is. I mean, I would challenge any of my listeners to, without doing any research, to be able to tell us who the head of the Democrat Party is. I don't even know. But they're wildly trailing the Republican National Committee by nearly every fundraising metric, and that was Politico. By the end of June, the RNC had $80 million on hand, compared to the $15 million for the DNC. The fundraising gap has only widened since then, with the DNC reporting having less cash this summer than at any point in the past 5 years. The DNC's financial woes come as many Democrats have become increasingly frustrated with Chairman Ken Martin. There's his name, Ken Martin. You know who that is? I don't. We know who Hakeem Jeffries is. We obviously know who Speaker Mike Johnson is, Kevin McCarthy, all of those people. But Ken Martin, have no idea. In June, one DNC member called Martin weak and whiny, while another said the chairman has been invisible, which is why we really don't know who he is. The Monday report indicated that major Democratic donors agree, having, quote, withheld money this year amid skepticism about the party's direction, while the small dollar donors, who have long been a source of strength, are not growing nearly enough to make up the gap. Donors, quote, donors see the DNC as rudderless, off-message, and leaderless, a Democratic advisor told Politico. Those are the buzzwords I keep hearing over and over. Now, the committee, which has already spent more than $15 million on expenses from Kamala Harris's failed presidential campaign, is grappling with money problems even as donors keep contributing to other Democratic groups and candidates, according to Politico. And if you compare that with the fundraising efforts of Republicans and Donald Trump, there isn't even any comparison. And in previous years, it's really kind of been a race. The Democrats and the Republicans have been kind of, I don't know if I want to say neck and neck, but they've been pretty close. Now, the DNC has seen bitter infighting. Okay, so, Ken Martin, whoever this guy is not inspiring any sort of confidence among Democratic voters. And let me just explain who this is, a little bit about fundraising. In both parties, you have people who are enormously wealthy, and they've been giving to, Democrat and Republican causes for a really long time. It's both sides have these types of people. And so, they're the same people you go to when you have a good candidate and, they need some cash for running a campaign. And these types of folks tend to be your major source. Now, what if the folks that you had been going to for years and years and years, enormously wealthy guys and men and women, and they pretty much said, no, we're not donating anymore. You get to a point where you're so reliant on a source, and they never failed you before, so why would you think that they're going to stop? And then all of a sudden, they turn the spigot off. That's where the Democrat Party is right now. Now, to couple that with the bitter infighting, and this is another thing that turns donors off, is when a party can't get behind a single message. When you've got different factions within the party, and we're in Wyoming, we're seeing this with the Republican Party right now. There are some more radical. I think more radical elements of the Wyoming Republican Party who, for whatever reason, they've decided that power is more important than principle. And on this program, I've told you a lot about Senator Bo Bite Me Biteman, and how he didn't kind of sell us out. He did in the Senate. He gave 7 of the 10 committees to liberals. He's cozied up with Tara Nethercott. If you look at his voting record, man, it went off the cliff. He voted pretty conservative last session or session before, and then last session, he's barely. He's not even a moderate. According to YO Rhino, I think he's at like 60%, which is an F following the Republican Party platform. So, we got these factions in, every state, but in the DNC, it's more pronounced. Now, think about this. The committee ousted duly elected Vice Chair David Hogg in June. Frankly, I was kind of surprised that they elected that radical, but they did. He got enough votes to win, and he was their vice chair. Well, he went a little crazy, and so they ousted him. After Martin blasted Hogg's $20 million scheme to fund primary challenges against, quote, ineffective, asleep-at-the-wheel Democratic incumbents. The turmoil escalated when 2 of the party's most influential labor leaders quit their DNC posts, citing the party's direction under Martin. So, it's a classic case of poop rolling downhill, which I guess is pretty much how you should characterize everything the Democrats try to do. After the powerful American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten, a hog ally, resigned from her DNC role, and Representative Ro Khanna said he wanted a party with a big tent and inclusion, not subtraction and pushing people out. While Mark Pocan, who I don't even know who this guy is, Wisconsin, wrote on X that, quote, he would love to have a day go by that the DNC doesn't do something embarrassing and off message. Quote, if Ken, that's this Ken Martin, really wanted to impress donors, he'd go do 20 or 30 salon events with donors and let them yell at him. The Democratic advisor told Politico, adding, quote, if you take that one on the chin, make some changes, then I think we could see some movement. But he's not going to do that. And neither are any of the other Democrats. So they're not only are they absolutely in disarray, and you know their strongest candidate right now is Zoran Mamdani in New York. They've got guys like the governor of Pennsylvania. His name escapes me right now, but pretty strong candidate. I mean, very popular in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris should have chosen him as her vice presidential running mate, but she didn't because he's Jewish, and there's a very strong stream of anti-Semitism that goes through the Democrat Party. And frankly, in some of the more radical fringe groups in the Republican Party, there's a lot of anti-Semitism there too. And I talked about that yesterday on the program. And I think if you follow Wyoming politics, I mean, I don't even want to mention these people on the program and give them any more oxygen than they already have. But it's it's pretty, I don't know how you want to call it. I mean, it's pretty disappointing. Definitely that. Shocking. But I think that it speaks to the level of, I guess I would call it, being immature, the level of immaturity in some of the minds that claim to be Republicans. And here's the thing, man, when things get tough, when you have to have arguments about real policy, you end up finding out who the true blue conservatives are and who those are that have just been along for the ride. And imagine it like a pendulum. I've often described it this way, that if you push a pendulum too hard on any one side, the little ball on the bottom of it tends to go all the way around, and it ends up helping the other side. And that's exactly a good example of that was in the House District 40 race last year. We had a good, solid conservative candidate in Mark Jones running against a radical liberal, just not a good candidate, Marilyn Connolly. I mean, terrible on her feet, just not inspiring at all. It was very clear that at the and Johnson County has turned way more liberal than it was in the past. But at the very least, if you had those two people in there, Mark Jones probably would have taken it. Enter Liberty Poley and some of the more radical elements of the Republican Party. She enters, and there's no chance that she is going to win. She wasn't even in the state for most of the campaign. And the only reason that she entered the race, or she was pushed to enter the race, is to make sure that Mark Jones didn't win it. The conservative didn't win it. And so these radical elements in the Wyoming Republican Party pushed so hard, and I'll even give them some credit saying at least their intentions were, conservative, but they pushed so hard that it ended up helping elect the radical liberal. So in other words, if whatever it is that you're doing is helping the other side, then you are, by definition, part of the other side. And I mean, it's like I say, so there are those types of elements in both the Republican Party and in the Democrat Party. In the Democrat Party, nationally, those examples of that are Zoran Mamdani, clearly a radical. I've got a piece here in the stack of stuff that claims that we shouldn't call him a communist. He definitely is. He's definitely a Marxist. But it's a piece from The Blaze, and let's see here. Yeah, I don't have it on the top of the stack, but we'll get to it a little bit later. But those are the radical elements in the Democrat Party. And so, I mean, the same holds true for both sides. The difference being, in the Republican Party, we're seeing what Chris Bedford of The Blaze calls a tectonic vibe shift, absolutely remaking American culture. Now, compare where we were, 4 years ago, right in the middle of, let's just go 3 years ago, right in the middle of the Biden administration. And we started seeing and I would call it, I wanted to say a resurgence of the Trump phenomenon, but I think that it was just growing in strength. I don't think that it ever went away. But what we're seeing now is that it's cool to be a Republican. Whereas, before the media kind of characterized, and they're still trying to characterize Republicans as, teetotaling, do-gooders, and just uncool. It's like your dad, and I don't even know how to describe it. Let's go to the piece. Quote: Republicans flood social media with sharp, hysterical, and widely shared videos. They crack down on crime in the streets and enjoy rising poll numbers. Democrats, by contrast, gasp for air, wag fingers, and whine. This isn't just another swing in the cycle of political fortunes. Something deeper has shifted. American politics has undergone a profound change. Now, consider a simple benchmark. Tuesday will mark 32 years and 7 months since Bill Clinton. Young, charismatic, and eager to project cool. You remember when he was on, was it Jay Leno? Anyway, he's on a late-night TV show, and he played the saxophone. I mean, that was, at the time, Bill Clinton was cool, even though he was a whining Democrat, and I never thought he was cool. But, just think about that image. A guy that's running for president, he's playing the sax on national TV. Okay, that was the Democrat Party of 30 years ago. Way cooler than the Republican Party. Well, he walked on stage to play his saxophone with Fleetwood Mac. For the first time since JFK, Democrats looked hip. Republicans, meanwhile, were stuck defending the status quo, explaining Reaganomics, pushing back against rock stars, and getting mocked on Saturday Night Live. The problem for conservatives for years is that they made conservative content. And I don't mean that it was content saying free markets and freedom and personal liberty and personal responsibility. No. It was opposed to content imbued with their worldview and values. They say that when you're explaining, you're losing. And from Whitewater to Iraq to healthcare and corporations or people too, Washington Republicans would spend most of the next 3 decades explaining. And really, that's a problem with people who generally are conservative, because we do believe in the argument, and we want to persuade people. And the way that you persuade people is you explain your position and you try to get them to come to your side. Well, that's not cool, right? It has the air of a stuffy old professor sitting in a library in a YouTube video. It's not fun. It's not going to bring anybody to your cause, and it's certainly nothing new. And as Bedford explains, that's what we did for 30 years. Quote, prosperity is actually rising, even if it's all plastic and we're buying it from abroad. Quote, that woman is sleeping in her car with the baby actually lives more comfortably than princes of medieval Europe. The only way to have freedom here at home is to have elections 6,200 miles away in that country between Jordan and Iran. You guys, Walmart is a force for good, convenience, cheap prices. These are the ridiculous things that Republicans would lean on. Now, it might not be your kind of music, but and there was a video put out by the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement released last week. It was a music video. Might not be your type of music, but would an administration that gave a darn about Democrat shrieks post glossy videos of its new enforcement SUVs with a song about how much money they've got now and how they don't pull up with no knife because I bring guns to fights? Yeah. Just not even cool, my friends. Think about the videos that Democrats were putting out, and they were shadow boxing in the videos. You remember that one? How completely ridiculous everybody thought that was. Now compare that to advertisements that the U.S. military put out right after Pete Hegseth was confirmed. Strong beats, really cool videos, awesome planes, big, huge fighting machines. Totally cool. Now, is it appropriate? Who cares? Is it a good beat and more? It's the kind of thing that that early on in Bedford's journalistic career, Republicans would have pounced on from Democrats. Ben Shapiro lecturing about lewdness and violence. Crossfire era bow-tied Tucker Carlson, irritated and confused, while the hammered James Carville cackles at him and Jon Stewart pretends he's cooler than Steve Earle. Now, no longer today. Okay, now all of those things, and I know it was a little convoluted, but just think, for the longest time, Republicans were not cool. When I was in high school, Pat Buchanan was running for president. There's nothing cool about Pat Buchanan, okay? I agree with most of the stuff that he was saying, but definitely not cool. He's not Bill Clinton playing the sax with Fleetwood Mac. Okay, there was no comparison whatsoever. Well, not any longer. Today, Tucker is greeted like a rock star by young people when he walks into a room and waves from Kid Rock's balcony at a Nashville bar. I personally think that Tucker Carlson has gone off his rocker for a number of different reasons, but that doesn't diminish his popularity. I mean, there's a lot of young people that think that Tucker Carlson is way cool. Now, if you watch the, man, I don't even know if it showed up in the interview with Gabe Saint, but he and I did have a conversation. I'm like, man, I don't really agree with a lot of the things that Tucker is doing. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. RFK Jr. And did you see the video of him and Pete Hegseth doing the pull-ups and the push-ups? How absolutely cool is that? We got a guy who's significantly older than a lot of young people. I mean, just absolutely ripped, along with the Secretary of Defense doing pull-ups and push-ups. Come on. I mean, there is a reason why Republicans are winning and Democrats are losing. Guys like Shane Gillis, once fired from SNL, are giggling mirthfully at guys like Stephen Colbert, who is the first of the completely uncool late-night scolds to watch his iconic platform disappear beneath the waves. And that is a really good example, my friends. For how long was Stephen Colbert on his show and just mercilessly making fun of Republicans, and his ratings were through the roof? Now, he no longer has a show, or he won't very soon. Across town, Democrat congressmen are sweating in front of Union Station looking for reporters and recording breathless videos about how crime rates are actually great, and that lurking menace you felt on city streets isn't real at all. This is the part I was getting to earlier when I said that Americans have been lied to for so long by Democrats that there's literally nothing for them to believe in. They say stupid stuff like statistics say it's safe. Crime rates are at a 30-year low. Yeah, but you cooked the books to come up with those numbers. And, if one thing is true in politics today is that voters want authenticity. If there is the slightest bit of inauthenticity in what you're doing, your ratings are going to tank. So you have to be honest, and that is one thing that the Democrats can't do, because none of their ideas actually work in the real world. Marxism, socialism, all of the crazy things that Mom Dami and Elizabeth Warren are advocating for, none of those things actually work in the real world. So shut up, no one's buying it anymore, and the rejection is making matters worse for Democrats who truly, deeply cannot handle how much fun we're making of them. If you want to get under a liberal skin, all you have to do is mock them. If you mock them, they can't handle it. Perfect example of that. I did an episode, it was last week, and it was called The World According to Ogden. And I played all of his dumb sound bites where he just absolutely made a fool out of himself, and he melted down in the comment section. If you want to read some stuff that's actually pretty funny, go to the Cowboy State Politics Facebook page, find the episode that says The World According to Ogden, and read the comments underneath it. It's absolutely entertaining, my friends. That guy he was melting down trying to defend himself from a guy who he says has a third-rate podcast. For 3 days straight, he commented, and it was like one every hour, all day, all the way up until like 11 o'clock at night. Lovely Christine and I were sitting on the couch, and every once in a while I'd say, oh, hey, babe, here's another one. Hey, honey, look at this one. This one's funny. But all I did was mercilessly mock him through the whole episode. That's what liberals can't stand. So no one wants to laugh at the conservative comedian or tune in to the conservative millennial. Could you possibly be less cool? The conservative movie space was more of the same in the past, but we're not in that space anymore, my friends. The movie liberals don't want you to see it. Who cares? People want entertainment. Well, see, liberals knew all of everything that I'm talking about. They made movies that were good. They also imbued with liberal teachings. We might have grumbled, but it was the best show in town. And when they made liberal movies instead of movies that were liberal, they ended up with flops. Even peak Matt Damon couldn't get people to watch his dumb movie about fracking. Now, that's all Democrats produce now, from late-night TV to award shows. Politics drowns out entertainment. And if you noticed, like, everything is political. I mean, if you're talking to a Democrat, it doesn't matter what the subject matter is, they will turn it to politics. No longer can they just have like comedy for comedy's sake. We can't laugh at anything because it's everything is political. Everything has an agenda with it. Now, the more audiences tune out, the more the Democrats lecture us. Why aren't you listening? Fascism, they cry. I had somebody quote on a Facebook post yesterday just calling me a fascist. My reply was Democrat. I mean, it's just absolutely hilarious. And the truth is, these folks have no idea what's going on, which is why their fundraising is down, which is why their poll numbers are down, which is why they don't have really a good candidate at all. There's not even a Democrat waiting in the wings to run for president the next time. Not that they would get elected when competing with, J.D. Vance or whomever is going to be the nominee. But the Democrats don't get it, and that's why they're failing. But politics, my friends, are fleeting. Republican dominance in Washington could be ended in just over a year. But the culture is less fleeting. The shift is real, and it isn't going anywhere. And when you look at the popularity of conservatives on campuses, I mean, it's pretty obvious. The episode or the interview I did with Gabe Saint, I mean, that thing's going gangbusters, my friends. I haven't looked at it this morning, but yesterday it was way up. It's because being a conservative is cool again. And until the Democrats figure that out, and hopefully they never do, their poll numbers are going to be in the toilet, just where they belong. Well, let's see here. We got about 10 minutes before the break, but this one's going to take a little bit longer. So let's go ahead and take our second break. And when we come back, I've got a couple pieces from Bill Maher going along with this cultural shift that's happening in politics. Even wacko liberals like Bill Maher can see it. So we'll do that when we come back. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Back in a minute. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely, and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger.
state politics is only going to get stronger. I've got some things planned, my friends, that you are absolutely going to love, and I can't wait to tell you about them. Here in a couple of weeks, maybe a little bit longer, I'll be telling you about it. It's going to be fun. I put a lot of work into it, and I'm super proud of it. So there's a lot of really cool things coming for Cowboy state politics and real media in Wyoming. That would be this program and other conservative news outlets. Now, before the break, we were talking about why the Democrats are absolutely losing it. And I saved this piece, and before I was talking about how for everything Trump does, the Democrats oppose it. I mean, he could say that oxygen is good and they would stop breathing just because they oppose him. Well, enter Jamie Raskin. Now, he is the consummate Trump-hating, TDS-suffering representative, member of the Unselect Committee, Liz Cheney's left hand. I guess she had two left hands anyway. But he was on PMS NBC talking about the National Guard taking over or helping out with law enforcement in Washington, D.C. And he called it a recipe for chaos. Now, everything that the Democrats have told you, and I shouldn't say everything, most everything, has been a bunch of bullcrap. Kamala was going to win the election, take the vaccine or you're going to die, all of that. We have been lied to for so long by the media that we no longer believe it. And the only thing the Democrats have left is to screech and complain. Listen to this. This is fantastic, right? Because it's the same old trope, and none of them have really understood why exactly their poll numbers are tanking. But he says that it's oppression of the people in Washington and stopping crime is a recipe for chaos. Listen to this. Oh, that's not the right one. Hold on, this one.
Thank you, Michael. Look, the rationale for this takeover is extremely flimsy. I mean, everybody knows the real emergency was the public relations crisis that Donald Trump was suffering with the Epstein files, which he had promised to release, and now he is completely disavowing the promise and running away from it.
Okay, now that was just 2 days ago that he said this on PMS NBC. Now, the Epstein files, I don't really care. I haven't talked about them for a while. I mean, I do have a piece about Bill Barr in here. I don't know if we'll get to it. But he's saying the reason why the National Guard is in Washington, D.C. is to cover up the problem with the Epstein files. It's not crime. It's not murders. It's not the high crime rate in Washington, D.C., 300% higher than it usually is. No, none of that. It's just to cover up for Epstein. Ridiculous. And he wonders why American citizens don't trust him. But listen to some more of it.
But the statutory hook for it is also completely defective because there is within the Home Rule Act the opportunity to declare an emergency, but the remedy for that is for the president to order the mayor to provide services from the police to the federal government. So it contemplates something like, a violent insurrection in the Capitol, send the police over.
January 6th.
Maybe there's a foreign dignitary who needs a police escort, something like that. A specific purpose that's federal in nature, that is discrete. It doesn't involve a takeover of the police. So they rebuffed on that, but now they're mobilizing the National Guard. They're bringing that National Guard in from South Carolina, from Ohio, from West Virginia, from all these states. Why? And what's the precedent for that? I'm not even sure what the authority for that is. Under whose direction are they serving? Are they being directed by the governors of those states, or are they under President Trump's direction now?
All right.
But does that
hold on. How many National Guard units are overseas in the Middle East serving in the U.S. military? How many of those? There's a big contingent that's in Jordan from Wyoming there right now. Thankfully, they'll be coming home, I think, in about a couple weeks maybe. But the president can send National Guard troops pretty much wherever he wants. This whole thing that, is it the governors? Yeah, it's a bunch of bull crap. But we're getting to the good part. Just stick with me here.
They've been federalized? Because I don't believe they've been federalized. So this is just a recipe for chaos. And if this is the template for what he wants to do in all of these other so-called Democrat-run cities. It is a recipe for chaos.
Yeah, it's a recipe for chaos. And I mean, there is no other talking point that the Democrats have than it's just orange man bad. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if we get the crime rate down, if we're arresting people, if we're stopping drug dealers. Nope, none of that matters. Everything is Trump derangement syndrome. Well, Bill Maher had Chris Pratt on his program. And I mean, it's a wide-ranging discussion. But now Chris Pratt starts to mock Trump haters for being allergic to good policy. And in the course of the conversation, he ends up defending RFK Jr. Let me just read you a little bit of the piece, and then I'll show you the video. Quote, actor Chris Pratt says it's not hard for him to back RFK Jr. despite him being a member of the Trump administration. Pratt is married to Catherine Schwarzenegger, whose mother, Maria Shriver, is part of the Kennedy family. Okay, I mean, used to be married to Arnold Schwarzenegger. Comedian Bill Maher recently asked Pratt about his connection to the Kennedys and wanted to know what type of criticism he's faced over the relationship. Pratt opined that the media has taken a lot of shots at him and others through unnamed sources that he believes do not exist at all. Quote, he says, in politics, you inherit enemies. And when you jump in on the bandwagon and with the most divisive president ever, it makes sense that they're going to try to make you look terrible. But both Maher and Pratt agreed that there is something the media cannot take away from RFK Jr., that he's fighting big industry on behalf of the American people, particularly, as Maher described, Kennedy Jr. is over the target regarding toxic ingredients in food and pharmaceuticals being used by children. Still, Pratt said he finds it nonsensical for anyone to criticize the HHS secretary simply for being in Trump's orbit. And let me just play you that video. Hold on just a second. Here you go.
Overseas that seem to be supported in a bipartisan way, like getting terrible toxic stuff out of our kids' food. I think that's a great thing. And so, if you do that, that's amazing. I'd hate to be so mired in hatred for the president that any success from his administration is something I'd have an allergic reaction to. To be like, oh, well, if they do it, I don't want it to happen. I'll put Clorox in my children's cereal myself. It's like, come on, be reasonable here. There's certain things that would be a good thing to have. I want them all to be successful.
You know, when it comes to like the media, like you were saying, and like what they say about you, people have to understand our cynicism, or I won't include you, I'll just say mine, about the media comes from something that most people do not have access to, that we have access to, which is we read things about ourselves.
Right.
Most people don't.
Right.
Okay. So, and you go, if you got this much wrong about something where I know what the truth is, what are you getting wrong about the other thing?
Completely.
That's so in my mind.
100%.
You know, like you can't really expect me to trust you after you said this and this and this. Mm-hmm. And maybe you really thought it. If that's the case, then you're just kind of dumb and lazy.
Right.
Lazy, didn't do your homework. Would have been so easy to look it up.
Right.
Or you're just slanted. You're just like, oh, he's on the bad team because he had dinner with Trump or whatever your reason this week is.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to shit on that. And like, okay, but then don't expect me to believe you about it.
All right. So exactly right. I mean, what Maher is saying, what Maher and Chris Pratt are saying, is that the Democrat opposition doesn't really have anything to do with values or their principles or their platform or any of their policies. They only resist because the president's name is Trump. I mean, and that's it. There's nothing more to it. Putting it simply, Pratt explained that a lot of discourse could emerge just from two political sides being somewhat reasonable. That's one of the reasons why I tell you all the time, you know, just about everybody is welcome on Cowboy State Politics. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to have one of those conversations where I agree with you. But the interview with Trey Sherwood, and we didn't agree on a single thing, yet we still had a good conversation. But there are a lot of folks in the media, and they do one of two things. Either A, they won't have a conversation with somebody that disagrees with them. Or B, and this is more likely, whomever it is that's on their program, they end up agreeing with them. It's the most disgusting thing that I've ever seen. Come on, we can have a clash of ideas. We can put our ideas together. We can have an argument about it. We'll find out which one's the better. But the problem is that Democrats and those liberal Republicans in Wyoming, and those people they're allied with them, by the way, they're not really interested in having a conversation about anything. And the greatest example, I think, of this is the nuclear debate that's happening in Wyoming right now. There are a number of people in the Republican Party that they just see dollar signs and they say, this is a heck of an opportunity for Wyoming. And I've seen some comments from some notable conservatives that I can't believe other conservatives are anti-business. No. I think you're missing the argument here. The question is about the nuclear waste, and is it a good idea for Wyoming? I mean, we can debate the economics of it later. I mean, the question is not whether or not we can do this. The question is whether or not we should do this. But we're kind of at a point where you got two sides and never the two shall meet. I mean, we can't have a discussion about what is good for Wyoming or whether, we should be putting nuclear waste in the ground. I personally think that's kind of a bad thing. And if you want to know my personal opinion on the whole thing, I'm not opposed to nuclear energy. I am opposed, however, to nuclear waste. We already have one nuclear disposal site in Wyoming. It's in Shirley Basin. But the difference is most of the material that's contained there is all alpha radiation. That is, it's low-level radiation, the kind that you'll pick up in your house radon. That's all alpha radiation. It's really not all that dangerous. But nuclear waste, that's gamma radiation. That's the kind of stuff that Putin uses to kill off his political enemies. That's the kind of stuff that will kill you, the stuff that doesn't decay in under a couple of thousand years. That is the nuclear waste that they want to store in Wyoming. And I mean, if you can prove to me that it's entirely safe, which I don't think that you can, but, trying to be open-minded about it, if you can, then okay. The other question is, why should we be storing other states' waste in Wyoming? Because that is inevitably what will happen. I know these politicians well enough to where they get an okay for some nuclear waste, and then it will be, well, why not store everything? Look at how much money they're going to pay us. And with the governor and all but one of the members of the SLIB board saying that they're going to okay anything that makes the state money, this is a disingenuous conversation from the very beginning. And if you want to have a real conversation about it, if you want to sit down and have a clash of ideas, well, then let's do that. But if you have two sides that are just completely opposed to whatever the other side says, you're not going to have any sort of productive conversation, which is why I value, I really do like Bill Maher. He's a liberal, but he's not one of these wacko ones. I mean, at least he's reasonable. I showed you the video. And they're sitting around talking like reasonable people. Let me show you another one. This video was shortly after Bill Maher went to the White House and had dinner with President Trump. Watch this one.
But just to take an example, tariffs. Now, I remember along with probably most people, were saying at the beginning, by the 4th of July, somebody had a thing how the the economy was going to be tanked by then. And I was kind of like, well, that seems right to me, but that didn't happen. Now, it could happen tomorrow. I'm just saying that's reality. So let's work first from the reality of that, not from I just hate Donald Trump. Because that's boring and doesn't get us anywhere and leads you to dishonesty. Because the truth is, I don't know what his strategy is. But look, the stock market is at record highs. I know not everybody lives by the stock market, but I also drive around. I don't see a country in a depression at all. I see people out there just living their lives. And I would have thought, and I got to own it, that these tariffs were going to sink this economy by this time, and they didn't. So, how do we deal with that fact? Because that's the fact.
Yeah, I think first is, and I've learned this the hard way. not to make predictions about what's going to happen because it's really difficult to predict anything. And if I was good at predicting things, Hillary would have been the president in 2016 and I wouldn't have sold my Netflix stock back in 2010.
Okay.
But here we are.
Here we are. And you'll notice that both of them said, hey, let's deal with facts. Let's deal with things that are true. And you can't have a debate with somebody unless both sides agree on the definitions before you ever get started. That you agree on the facts, and then let's debate our position on them. And that's where productive conversation starts and ends, my friends. But the problem is with the Democrats and liberal Republicans in this state, redcoats. And let me just explain this whole redcoat thing. I've got a lot of comments recently. What are these redcoats? Well, I'm a historian, as you all know, and I'm fascinated with the American Revolution. And during the Revolution, the British had spies everywhere, and nobody really knew who was a redcoat and who was a freedom-loving patriot, because they all wore the same type of clothes. And that's kind of the point of being a spy, is that you blend in. Well, it wasn't until these redcoats went to a home that they probably seized from a colonist, and they took off their patriot-loving clothes and revealed themselves from who they really were, redcoats. And that, my friend, is a Democrat who is hiding in the Republican Party. They are, tried and true Democrat. That's how they vote, and there's a lot of them that vote with the Democrats, where Eric Barlow is one of those. He voted with the Democrats his entire career, over 70% of the time. And the only reason they're in the Republican Party is so they can hang that R at the end of their name, and it's easier to get elected. A lot of them are liars. They certainly don't portray themselves as who they really are. And the truth is, I would rather deal with a Democrat than I would any of these redcoats. At least a Democrat is honest about who they are. They call themselves a Democrat. Probably can't trust anything else they say, but at least they admit that they're a Democrat. So that's why I call all of these liberal Republicans redcoats. Now, let me give you a perfect example of one. And let me just preface this by saying that Rod Miller and I are kind of friends. He's been on the program a couple of times. I do enjoy his wit every once in a while. But we've got to call a spade a spade. And in this case, our pal Rod Miller has written a truly dishonest column, and it's entitled "Gomers in the Wyoming Freedom Caucus." And he goes on and on and on about what a gomer is, and it's a castrated bull, is what that is. Let's see here. And he said, Gomers can't get the job done, but they raise the excitement level in the herd to unfulfilled heights, just like the Freedom Caucus. And he says, quote, the most recent display of Gomeristic behavior is presented to us by Chris Knapp, a card-carrying member of the Freedom Caucus from Gillette. Here's what happened. Tom Lubnow, former Speaker of the Wyoming House, who has 40 years of experience on the subject, was invited to address the legislature's Joint Corporations Committee on August 15th, as the committee worked on amendments to the Wyoming Public Records Act. Tom was willing to share his thoughts and try to make the committee's work better. Tom is also a fine Miller says he's a fine columnist for Cowboy State Daily. No, I don't think that he is. Every single column that Tom Lubnow writes attacks the Freedom Caucus, and he's become increasingly more vulgar in doing so. But Miller continues. Knapp, a Republican co-chair of the committee, pitched a hissy fit over Lubnow's appearance, whining that Tom had written unkind things about legislators in his column. Knapp worried that things would get out of hand and that some politicians' feelings would get hurt, and succeed in having Lubnow booted from the agenda. And then he, again, uses a common phrase that Rod Miller uses all the time. And he continues, and let me just read a little bit more, and then we'll talk about what actually happened. Knapp's childish tantrum affirms that among the freedoms that the Freedom Caucus pretends to cherish, our First Amendment freedoms of speech and petitioning the government are strangely absent. And he goes on for another page and a half, saying how Chris Knapp is assaulting the First Amendment and denying Tom Lubnow the ability to testify. But there's one little fact that Rod Miller leaves out. That Tom Lubnow did testify. For over 30 minutes, he testified. The only difference that Chris Knapp made, and by the way, I was not in favor of him removing Tom Lubnow from the agenda. I think that it was a strategic error. Had it been me, I would have loved to have him on the agenda front and center and then just pepper him with questions. There's nothing like a captive audience, my friends. And when you're invited by the legislature, you get to answer questions. What a perfect opportunity to ask him about all of the really, untrue, unfair, and ridiculous things that Tom Lubnow has said about the Freedom Caucus. But Chairman Knapp didn't do that. He removed him from the agenda. But he did not, however, remove his ability to testify in front of that committee. The only thing he did is took him off the agenda and said, hey, Jack, you can testify like every other citizen in Wyoming during public comment, which is where he belongs. He didn't abridge his freedom of speech. He didn't stop his freedom of speech. In fact, he said he could testify in the public comment period. But at no point was Tom Lubnow's First Amendment right abridged in any way. There's no reason that Tom Lubnow should have a vaulted position or should have any position above a Wyoming citizen and be put on the agenda. Okay, so maybe he is an expert on public records law, and, I've heard a lot of people say that he is. Okay, fine. But that doesn't mean that he gets to be on the agenda, and it doesn't mean that he gets to have some sort of status above a Wyoming citizen. And Rod, I don't mind your criticism. I really enjoy your wit a lot of the time. And by the way, again, Rod Miller, come on the program, my friend. Let's talk about this, but we're going to talk about it honestly. And this column is in no way honest. Now, at no point does Rod Miller say that Tom Lubnow actually did get to testify, that he did get over 30 minutes in front of that committee. The only difference is he didn't get to be on the agenda. That's the only thing that Chris Knapp changed. If we're going to have conversations, if we're going to have to come to, a place where we can have a reasonable discussion, we have to be honest. And Rod, your column wasn't honest at all. And you can fling insults all day. I do fairly often on this program. But at the very least, be honest about what you're talking about. Tom Lubnow did get to testify. And his First Amendment rights were not abridged. Chris Knapp didn't take them away. And frankly, nobody can take away your First Amendment rights, as you rightly know, my friend. But the point here is you got to be honest in what you're writing. And this piece isn't. Let me read you a little bit more of it. Quote, perhaps Knapp was relying on the Freedom Caucus, quoting now, perhaps Knapp was relying on the Freedom Caucus's oft-employed tactic when one of their own does something stupid. They circle the wagons around their embarrassed colleague, excuse the miscreant's stupidity, and call everyone else rhinos. It's really difficult to gin up any respect for politicians like Knapp and Bear when they can't keep their feet out of their mouths. The closest corollary I can come up with is Gomers. And that presents the rest of Wyoming with the question of what to do about these Gomers. The answer is, from where I sit on my horse watching their goofiness, is to remove them from the herd. We put them in there, we can take them out. And let's see here. Let me jump up a couple of paragraphs here. At that time, Knapp pawed the dust, slung snot bubbles, and demanded Lubnow's 86ing from the Joint Corporation's agenda. His co-chair of the Senate committee, Nancy Case, warned, okay, have it your way, buckaroo, but these things don't turn out like you expect. This will have traction. Knapp should have heeded Case's advice because he has experience. All right, blah, 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 blah. But the point is, at no point in this ridiculous column does Rod Miller admit that Tom Lubnow actually did testify for over 30 minutes. He had the same opportunity as every other Wyoming citizen. Just because he happens to be a former Redcoat Speaker of the House doesn't mean that he gets to be on the agenda. And, if you're going to be in the media, certainly I understand this. If you're going to say really bad things, really, and if you're going to, mock and castigate members of the legislature, well, you need to take your lumps along with them. But, again, I wasn't in favor of of removing him off the agenda. I thought it was a perfect opportunity to have him front and center. But be that as it may, took him off the agenda. But that doesn't mean that his freedom of speech was taken away. Let's be honest in our reporting. Let's be honest with our audience. And, and if you want a perfect example of why Republicans and Redcoats can't get along, it's because of stuff like this. Because it doesn't matter what it is, the liberal Republicans, the Redcoats in this state, twist things around, and so much so that there are some of the things they talk about that just aren't true. And Rod Miller's column, One of those things that's just not true, my friend. But again, I'll repeat the invitation. If you want to come on this program and talk about it, let's do that. I would love to have you on, but we're going to do it honestly. And we're going to agree from the very beginning on what the facts of the matter are. And we'll debate it. Moving on. I mentioned earlier in the show that I had a chance to talk with the Cynthia Lummis's campaign manager yesterday, and he brought up something that I think we all probably intuitively know, but it does have some real impacts. Now, there's a piece in Reason.com today entitled "Why Are So Few Judicial Vacancies? Why are there so few judicial vacancies for President Trump to fill?" Now, there's a dual problem with this, that the Democrats are opposing pretty much everything that President Trump is doing. Doesn't matter what it is. If President Trump's name is attached to it, the Democrats are opposed to it. But in this piece, it discusses how there really are very few vacancies. And there's two reasons. I mean, just before I get into the piece. One, the first Trump administration filled a lot of vacancies, and Joe Biden, or his people, whomever was controlling Joe Biden, filled a bunch of them too. But from Reason.com, quote, "The first Trump administration substantially reshaped the federal courts. Will the second Trump administration be equally effective or influential? The jury's still out on that. Even setting aside the Supreme Court, where President Trump made 3 appointments in a single term, it's looking like there will be significantly fewer opportunities to influence the balance and composition of the federal courts. At present, there are more Republican than Democrat nominees on the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, but there are Republican majorities on only 6 of the 13 circuits. There are also more Democratic than Republican appointees on district courts, as one would expect given that the Democratic president was making judicial appointments for the last 4 years. How much influence President Trump will have on the composition of the federal courts will largely depend on the extent to which eligible judges elect to take senior status or retire, thereby creating vacancies for Trump to fill. As Reason.com noted in May and July, it appears that some number of judges are more reluctant to take this step than one might expect. And if you take into consideration the main method by which the Democrats are opposing President Trump, it's through the courts. They don't really have anything else to work on or to work with, and so they're relying on judges to oppose President Trump's agenda. So those folks, those judges that are close to retirement are, I mean, it's just like anything. Like a lot of the judges are liberal leaning, and when you've got a conservative president, or excuse me, a Republican president in the White House, the likelihood that folks will retire is a lot lower because they don't want to be replaced by a conservative justice. Russell Wheeler at the Brookings Institution notes that, quote, "To date, there are fewer vacancies for Trump to fill than one would usually expect during the early part of a presidential term. Specifically, Wheeler suggests that there have been fewer strategic retirements by Republican-appointed judges than one might expect. Note, however, that any reluctance by Republican appointees to step down or take senior status does not directly affect the extent to which President Trump will influence the balance of the federal courts during his second term. Shifting the balance of the courts generally, and specific circuit courts in particular, will depend upon Trump having the opportunity to fill seats currently held by Democrat appointees. The new creation of court seats, as has been recommended by the Judicial Conference, could also have an impact, particularly on the district courts, but I don't think that that's really going to happen before 2028. Wheeler also echoes the speculation that some Republican judges may be reluctant to create vacancies because they don't want to be replaced by a Trump appointee. That's what I was referring to earlier. Whether because of their concerns about Trump himself, his attitude about the courts, or the sort of nomination that he would make. Comments by administration officials and proxies suggest that Trump is likely to emphasize different criteria in his second term than he did during his first, and that might be feeding into it. But there's another factor that may affect Trump's ability to influence the composition of the courts that is rarely discussed. The length of judicial service is increasing. Insofar as longevity is increasing, it should not surprise us that more judges are deciding to serve longer than they may have in the past. In addition, insofar as recent administrations and the Trump administration in particular have increasingly tapped younger judicial nominees, we would expect them to serve longer as well. So in other words, it's a combination of a lot of different factors. And it kind of remains to be seen how much influence Donald Trump is going to have on the courts, simply because of all of those different factors. But one thing is for certain, the Democrats are going to oppose everything. Doesn't matter what it is. And certainly they're going to oppose all of Trump's nominees. So, and I mentioned meeting with Cynthia Lummis's campaign manager. I mean, he flat told me that they have no idea when votes are going to come up. And he said they have been in session this session longer than any other session before. And it's all of these nominations that the Democrats are pushing everything. And he said the time of unanimous consent. And by the way, a lot of Biden's appointees went through by unanimous consent. There wasn't any argument about them. It was like, yeah, okay, we'll confirm them. But not this time. There's opposition to everything that Donald Trump is doing. And so, I mean, I think what you're going to see is just more opposition, and it's going to be a fight all the way through the next 4 years. And of course, we have the midterms next year, so we have no idea what's going to happen there. If I had to venture a guess, I would say that we'll probably hold the House of Representatives and the Senate. I think we'll probably gain a couple seats. But, you know, I mean, the majorities may be pretty slim. I mean, they're already really slim in the House of Representatives. So even if we were to gain, 2 or 3 more seats, you're still talking about a pretty slim majority. And it's a lot like herding cats, my friends, getting everybody on the same page. Now, here's a piece that I was referring to earlier, that Paul Gottfried of The Blaze has been, talking about Zoran Mamdani. And Mamdani is an interesting case because he is one of those rare politicians that, in my estimation, is purely ideological. A lot of candidates, they're Republican, they're conservative, but their ideology really doesn't drive everything. They can at least be reasonable. Not Mamdani. This guy is a straight up Marxist. But The Blaze, Paul Gottfried, is saying that we should stop calling him a communist. He's something a lot worse than that. So let me just start out with a couple of sound bites from Zoran Mamdani, and just so we can start with what he's been saying. I've played these for you before, but I just want to refresh your memory. Here is, let's see here, what he's saying about we have to be unapologetic about our socialism. Listen to this.
What the purpose is about this entire project, it's not simply to raise class consciousness, but to win socialism. And obviously raising class consciousness is a critical part of that. But making sure that we have candidates that both understand that and are willing to put that forward at every which moment that they have, at every which opportunity that they're given. We have to continue to elect more socialists. And we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism.
Oh, so that's what he's saying in public. That we have to be unapologetic. They have to be unapologetic about their socialism. So it's not like that Mamdani is hiding who he is or what he believes. It's more a matter of him like not caring, right? He's giving you kind of like the high level stuff. And you see a lot of Democrats do this. Bill Clinton did it during his second election, that you have to moderate your positions so that you can get people to go along with you. And so while Bill Clinton was pretty radical in his first election, he realized that if he were to get reelected, he had to move to the center. And that's why you saw him work with Newt Gingrich to balance the budget. He had to move to the middle. Now, here's another piece from Mamdani, and this one I think is more telling, and I think it'll give us an interesting perspective on what Gottfried is saying, is that Mamdani is something way worse than a communist. But listen to this.
But then there are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it's the end goal of seizing the means of production, where we do not have the same level of support at this very moment. And what I want to say is that it is critical that in the way that we organize, the way that we set up our work, and our priorities, that we do not leave any one issue for the other, that we do not.
Okay, so we have to seize the means of production, which is a line straight out of Marx's Communist Manifesto. So let's just start with the premise that Mamdani really is a radical. I don't really know what flavor of radical he is, but he's obviously saying some pretty communistic things. Now, we're going to take a break, and I want you to just think about those two sound bites. And when we come back, we'll hit Godfrey's article that, maybe there's something worse about our old pal Mamdani. Let's see. Let's go with this one. I mean, I don't know, my friends. I've told you for a while that a lot of these groups, LGBTQ, ZXP, WDS, the folks that support Iran, the Democrats, and the Marxists, really, they're all Marxist when you get down to their ideology. But we'll talk about more when we come back.
Ever since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States Gold and Silver Buyer's Guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap, and your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you non-stop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. I'm David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. A record that, the mainstream media, I really wish they would try, but they don't. They continue to print bullcrap pieces like the one we talked about from Rod Miller. Of course, he's an opinion columnist, and he's entitled to his opinion, but that doesn't make it any less untrue. Peter Gottfried is saying that we should stop calling the guy who's been saying all sorts of communist stuff a communist. Here's what he says, quote, "Every time I hear a Fox News host or a Republican pundit call New York City mayoral frontrunner Zohran Mamdani a communist or democratic socialist, I wince in annoyance. Sometimes I even yell at the TV. Not that they can hear me, and even if I could, they'd probably ignore me. In reality, however, Mamdani is not a would-be Lenin. He is, in fact, a practitioner of woke capitalism. He's not about to nationalize the means of production, though he said this, so I don't know."
But then there are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it's the end goal of seizing the means of production.
Okay, so there he is saying it, and yet Gottfried is saying, well, no, he's not some would-be Lenin, and he doesn't want to nationalize the means of production or seize the assets of wealthy progressives in Brooklyn's Park Slope and Manhattan's Upper East Side, the very people bankrolling his campaign and voting for him. The more we cling to outdated Cold War categories, the less attention we give to fighting the woke maniacs dismantling our constitutional order. What Mamdani will do, most likely, is strip police protection from working-class neighborhoods, pour taxpayer money into gimmicks like city-owned grocery stores, and glorify Hamas terrorists. Soviet-style central planning isn't on his agenda for the Big Apple. Cultural revolution is. Those calling Mamdani a communist are playing to boomer-era Republican fixations. They're appealing to people who see politics through Cold War lenses. The bad guys are commies, and anyone unwilling to bury socialism is the enemy. It's an easy way to rally the troops. Invoke Ronald Reagan's fight against the evil empire and pretend that Mao and Brezhnev will represent the ultimate threat. For some Republicans, democratic socialist is simply a euphemism for communist. And that means we're back in the glory days of battling the Soviets. It simply isn't so. Now, I've been called a right-wing Marxist by people who should know better. But when communism was a threat, I was as anti-communist as anyone alive. I even admired Senator Joseph McCarthy's efforts to expose Soviet infiltration of the U.S. government and military. To a point. I mean, I think we can all agree that McCarthy kind of went a little overboard in some cases. Doesn't mean he was wrong. It means he went a little overboard. But that's not the danger in front of us now, according to Gottfried. The real threat isn't Marxism, is what he says. Now, listen to this part. The greatest danger today comes from woke maniacs embedded in media, education, and government. People dismantling our constitutional order in the name of equity and inclusion. The more we cling to outdated Cold War strategies, the less attention we give to fighting them. What's more dangerous, Mamdani's pie-in-the-sky economic ideas or his militant abortion politics, his zeal for performing gender transition surgeries on minors, his rejection of biological sex, and his anti-woke, anti-white rhetoric. The communist label is the least of our concerns. Mamdani is a woke zealot, and nearly half of New York's voters embrace his politics. His biggest fans are young, college-educated progressives who love both his identity-based crusades and his promises of government giveaways. Some Republican commentators may be too nostalgic for boomer anti-communism or too wary of alienating their own socially liberal supporters to confront Mamdani's cultural extremism head-on. It's easier to rehash the 1970s and 80s rhetoric than it is to grapple with the ideological fight that's actually in front of us. Now, I think that Gottfried has a point. Now, just look at the coalition of groups that are behind Mamdani. You have the people who really are democratic, or what they call themselves, democratic socialists. They're just socialists. There is no democratic socialism. It's all just socialism. The folks that are in favor of Iran, the Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood types, well, they do have some Marxist tendencies. The LGBTQ, ZXP, WDS, woke maniacs, as Gottfried calls them. Well, they too want to change things. But in the end, they are all kind of Marxist. And this is where I depart from Gottfried's analysis. They do want a cultural change. They absolutely do. But in the end, it will be a form of, Islamo-Marxism. Now, Mamdani is an Islamist, but he is also a Marxist. And let's just talk about for a second the underpinnings of all of those ideologies. Now, you hear a lot of people say on TV, well, the Quran is a book of peace. Well, first of all, no, it's not. There are passages in the Quran that outright say you should kill all the infidels if they don't agree with you. Okay, so not a book of peace, and it's not a book of freedom either. But if you look at it from their perspective, that freedom is being an Islamist, well, then they're all about it, right? Which is why Mamdani can advocate for those things. So at his upbringing, where he's at, it is Islamist. But he's also fascist, or he's also Marxist, not fascist. We're all trotting around the same sort of isms. But he does have some Marxist ideology. Now, what is Marxism? So Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, and he wanted to radically change the economy from capitalism to one of communism. That is, the government owns the means of production, and everybody gets everybody according to his needs, and from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. There it is. You take from those who have and you give it to those people who have not, and everybody is the same. Well, in Islamism, that's kind of what happens too. Like, everybody is Islamist, and if not, we're just going to kill you. All women have to dress in a burqa. We operate on Shia law or Sharia law. And so, yeah, there are some Marxist tendencies there. Now, what about the woke LGBTQZXPWDS folks? Well, they too want a revolution. They too want everybody to be woke and agree with their position. It is a radical change. Now, Gottfried is right about this, that all of these groups do want a radical change of our society. The only question is, and this is where conservatives kind of get down in the weeds a little bit, and I fall into this category too. I end up wanting to explain what's happening, and I do want to explain it because I want you to understand who these folks are. But all of them have Marxist tendencies, and in the end result looks a lot like Marxism, and I frankly think that it really is. It's just what flavor. So, it's the difference between mint chocolate chip ice cream and chocolate and vanilla ice cream. Different flavors, but in the end, they're all ice cream. And so when you look at all of these different ideologies, look at the results of what they will create. And in the end, it all fits under the trappings of Marxism. Now, of course, Islamism was around way before Marx actually put pen to paper, but the ideology has always been there. It's just that Karl Marx wrote it down. The folks that are the woke maniacs, as Gottfried describes them, yeah, well, they do want everybody to believe the same way, and they will punish whomever disagrees with them. That's the whole cancel culture thing. It's the same thing when you compare it to Islamism. Either you're going to convert or die. And it's the same thing with straight up socialism, that you will be forced to participate in this socialist community. So I think when you get all the way down to it, you look at the end result of what that ideology would create. They all want a cultural revolution. They all want to change the society so it looks, so they shape it closer to their heart's desire. That's a phrase that comes from the Fabian Socialists. If you're a fan of the Glenn Beck program years ago, he did a series on the Fabian Socialists, remold the world closer to the heart's desire, which, by the way, there are some pretty high-profile politicos that were Fabian Socialists. But I'm getting off topic. But the point is that when you look at the results of all of the systems, all of the isms that all of these people want to create, really, all of it ends up being what Marxism would create. Now, it's a different flavor, different flavor ice cream, but in the end, it's still ice cream. And it's really, really dangerous. Unfortunately, New York City is probably going to end up experiencing Mamdani's version of Islamo-Marxism, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, like I say, doesn't matter what the title is. What does matter is the end result. And I think that you really got to watch out for a lot of this, because a lot of your radical liberals, while they don't truly want full-blown Marxism, they do want bigger government. They do want more government intervention. They want more government control of the economy. That's part of what's playing into this whole nuclear debate. Give the government more money so they can provide more services to you. And it's, my friends, it's extraordinarily dangerous. But at the very least, if you know what it is that you're seeing, if you can explain what it is that's going on, well, then you'll recognize it right off for what it is. And that's why on this program, I go to such great lengths in trying to explain what's going on to you, so that hopefully you'll go do some of your own research, and you'll be able to recognize these people from the gate, right? So I explain exactly what a redcoat is, how they operate. I show you sound bites, or I let you hear sound bites of them, and you recognize that rhetoric and that plan from the very beginning, and the hope being that you won't vote for it. Now, it's been a while. Moving on, but it's been a while since we've had a good gun segment. Now, we've had some good Second Amendment wins, as of late, but we haven't really had a segment of things that go boom.
That's great. That's what I
From Reason.com, court kills California's one gun a month law. Imagine that, being rationed where you can only buy one gun a month, or, buy one piece of podcasting equipment a month. How ridiculous. Actually, he makes that comparison in the piece. But this is by J.D. Tusil, and it was posted on Reason.com. Quote, the title of the piece is Court Kills California's One Gun a Month. All right, quote, what if you were only allowed to make one purchase of printers, signs, or gear for podcasts per month? Would you consider that fully respectful of your free speech rights, or would you view it as an attempt to muffle people's natural right to speak out, or perhaps a hint of more restrictions to come? California has something similar in the form of a law that limits people to buy one gun a month. If you rightfully believe that rationing the ability to express oneself violates First Amendment protections on the freedom of speech, you'll be glad to know that the courts have found that California's law in violation of the Second Amendment's protections for self-defense rights and barred its enforcement. According to California Penal Code Section 27535, quote, a person shall not make an application to purchase more than one firearm within a 30-day period. This subdivision does not authorize a person to make an application to purchase a combination of firearms, completed frames or receivers, or firearm precursor parts within the same 30-day period. A list of exceptions follows, unsurprisingly heavy on government enforcers and those licensed by the state, including cops, corrections officers, and private security companies, but most Californians were limited to one legal firearm purchase per month. The law has been in place since 1999, but expanded over the decades from concealable firearms to all guns. Now, the courts have not been kind to this law. Through years of rulings, the U.S. Supreme Court has acknowledged that the Second Amendment protects the natural right of individuals to keep and bear arms, and that it precludes many restrictions imposed at the state or local level. In particular, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. This is one of the big Supreme Court cases. It requires that gun laws be consistent with this nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. So, from the founding till now, whatever regulation you have has to comport with how we've treated firearms in the past. California's one gun a month law was challenged by a coalition of individuals and groups, including Michelle Nugent of the Firearms Policy Coalition and the Second Amendment Foundation. A U.S. District Judge found the law unconstitutional last year, though the decision was stayed by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals pending appeal. A three-judge panel of the same court reversed the stay last August, leaving the law unenforceable. Then, in June of this year, three judges of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on the appeal that the law, in fact, violates the Second Amendment. Well, of course it does. That was followed on August 14th by a court mandate putting the decision into effect and making the one gun a month law so much wasted ink in the state's list of statutes. For the court in the June decision, Judge Danielle Forrest points out that California, quote, contends that the one gun a month law is consistent with the strong tradition of restricting dangerous individuals from acquiring firearms. She notes that California acknowledges, as it must, that not all Californians are dangerous. but that California's law primarily impedes nearly all individuals from acquiring multiple firearms. The historical laws that the state cites as precedent for its one gun a month restriction are all more limited in scope than the California law. The judge writes, some of the historical regulations prohibited only a specific group considered to be dangerous from acquiring and possessing firearms. Laws targeting Indians, foreigners, and the intoxicated. The historical law that came the closest to the California law, according to the court, was a Virginia restriction on the carrying of more than one gun and 10 charges of powder when traveling near any native town or more than 3 miles away from an English plantation. But that law restricted only the number of guns that could be carried, not acquired. It was also in effect for just a few years, over a century before the founding of the U.S. By the founding era, the historical record suggests that it was common for Americans to carry 2, 4, or even 6 single-shot pistols on their belt, and that pistols were often sold in pairs. That is the historical tradition of the Second Amendment. But importantly, the court was unimpressed by efforts to ration the use of constitutionally protected rights. Quote, we are not aware of any circumstance where government may temporarily meter the exercise of constitutional rights in this manner, and we doubt anyone would think government could limit citizens' free speech right to 1 protest a month, their free exercise right to 1 worship service per month, or their right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures to apply only to 1 search and seizure a month. It's ridiculous, my friends, but good job to the Ninth Circus in the great state of California for invalidating that law. Well, my friends, we've burned up another busy broadcast, 2 hours on the program. I've got some stuff I got to do, so I've got to run a little bit early today, but make sure that you stay tuned to Cowboy State Politics. Don't miss the podcast, which will be out somewhere between 12 and 1 o'clock today. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. I'll see you tomorrow, my friends.